Hello, this is Patrick from XPression. I'd like to show you some updated workflows we have for using Adobe XMP metadata with XPression. A while back we did a tutorial and we showed you some of the features. I believe this was in version 6, showing you XPression and using XMP metadata. Let me briefly show you what that is. I'm going to go into Adobe Photoshop and I've got an image here. This is a TIFF file and we use the file info, so file info. You'll see there's a whole bunch of information here. I'm choosing raw data. And what you'll notice that I have in here is this whole chunk of metadata right here that was built using a custom schema that we created. And what you can see here, I've got the city name, it's Colorado. I've got a team nickname, it's Wolves. Full name or whole name is Colorado Wolves, a tri-code, RGB color values. Okay, this is what's in here. This is part of Adobe Photoshop. At a different time, we'll talk about how you make those panels. Now, if I come back into XPression, you can see that I have, for example, this image here, which is a team logo. And you can see I've got a spot to show the whole text, a tri-code, the RGB values, and then the team name, or the city name, and the nickname. So if I change from Arizona to Colorado, you can see that this updates. Now, the way this is done, and again, we did this in another tutorial, so we won't go too deep into it, is we find a metadata selector block and we go and we look for the metadata that's in that image, and we just use typical metadata mapping as if this was using data link. It works very similarly. So this was all done here. Now the problem that we have, let me show it to you. If I go into a newsroom system, let me launch that. If I go into my newsroom system and I log in, when the plugin opens up, if I go and I find that field and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on Arizona logo and I choose select, and I've got myself pointed towards the library with imagery. If I choose Colorado, for example, you may find the metadata updates, but what you'll notice if you're really paying attention is it doesn't change here. I'm left with what the original data was, and I'll explain why. If I come back into XPression, we're going to talk about Visual Logic for a second. The way that Visual Logic runs is once you trigger any render, it continuously runs and it doesn't stop. So no matter what happens, it's constantly pushing that information in, and that's what it has left over to it. Now, we've made a change. I'm going to go to a different template here, and I'm also going to go back into Visual Logic. And you notice this looks a little different. If you go into your scene objects, and let's say I'm going to choose the nickname for the team, and I'm going to go to the text properties. Inside the text properties, now there's a published value field. And if I take that information out, whatever has been published into that field is now handled. The nice part about that is I've done this up here, I've done that same metadata mapping, and instead of taking it into the text box, these text boxes don't mean anything anymore. Instead, I'm pushing it into the published value, and let me show you what that means. You won't see this here, and I'm going to go do a couple things and come back here. I'm going to go back over to my web browser and go into my graphics plugin. I'm going to choose a different template. You can see I've got team logos, new workflow. I'm going to discard all my changes. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the logo and I'm going to select a different one. I'm going to choose the Texas logo. And what I want you to notice, I've got the whole name, I've got the tri-code, I've got the RGB values, the city name, the nickname. You'll also notice I now have all the values here. So if I change this from Texas, let's say I change it to New York, guess what? All that information changes. Another nice part about it is I can now come in here, I can change that information. I can also blank it out if I don't want it. So this is one of the nice functions that's in here. And this is truly interactive. So again, you can see my RGB value, the red value, I'm going to change that to 255. And you'll notice that the color value changes here. It's completely interactive at this point, and all that now flows through. So I now have the information that I'm expecting to have. I have a way to edit that, and I have a way to add it to my story. So this all shows up now. What I want you to also notice is there's a city scene back here. So I'm going to go ahead and change the logo for a second. And if I'm going to change it back to Colorado, what I want you to notice, there's a video and plays in the background, and there's also what we call a word mark. That changed as well. How did I do that? Well, let's come back into XPression for a second. If you look at this quad here, and again, it's going to get a dynamic material, and you'll notice that for the quad, for the material, I'm using data link, and I'm choosing dynamic material. And what I've got here is I'm in my drive, my XMP folder. I have a folder called images. Inside there's a folder called Ross League logos. And then you see this, just the @ symbol, tricode @ symbol. This is what we refer to as a macro in XPression. And this is really simple. What it's literally doing is I'm saying in this macro, take the text object called tricode, which is right above it, and when I change this image, it's taking whatever the tricode comes to me from metadata. Right now that tricode is NY, and that's going to insert it in the middle of that scene. So it's basically saying it's looking for the file ny_wordmark. So if I take all of this information from here forward, and I open up File Explorer, and I put that into my File Explorer folder, what you're going to find is, check it out, here's ny vid, here's ny_wordmark. So that's how these are going to get replaced. I did the same thing. So here's the wordmark. In the background, it's kind of hard to tell, but there's a background graphic. I did the same thing. I'm looking for tricode_vid.avi, and all that's getting managed for me. And now when I put all this together, if I do this, whether I'm doing it in the sequencer or whether I'm doing it in the MOS plugin, it works the same. So I'm just going to create a new group here, and I'm going to put this image into my sequencer. And what I want you to notice, I'm going to click on the logo. I'm going to choose the team, which is the Colorado logo, and it updated all the different pieces. I'm missing a font in here for some reason. We'll figure that out later. But you can see that I'm getting the whole name, I'm getting the tricode, and that tricode is driving the graphic that happens in the background and also for my wordmark. So this is all functional now, whether you're doing this inside the sequencer or whether you're doing this, same team, whether you're doing this inside the MOS plugin. So this all now functions, works, drives everything that you're trying to accomplish using Adobe XMP metadata.